Monday, February 23rd. We have a quorum, and I wanted to just say that first of all. As usual, I provide a roadmap, and today the roadmap is pretty clear and pretty straightforward. Today we'll hear a presentation from DEED on the paid leave program rollout. Obviously, this program has been of keen interest to all of the members on this committee, so we wanted to make sure we got an update from DEED on this and that we give members plenty of time to ask questions. So the only agenda item that we have is our paid leave presentation from DEED, and we'll have a couple presenters from DEED, and again, there should also be in your packet, members, the paid leave update, and I'm certain that they're going to use that as a part of their presentation, and we will ask them if they want questions along the way or what they want. So first let me ask Evan Rowe as well as Greg Norfleet to come to the testifiers table, just so we can know exactly what it is that you all would like to do. And can we also make sure that the computer is working? All right, they tested that already. I want to say openly thank you to Tom Melton, who's right here to my right. And so if he didn't have it, I'd do the little elbow thing that he always sees as just a love tap anyway. So thank you, Tom. And thank you, Taylor, as well. Mr. Rowe, can you tell me how you would like things to roll out? Would you like members to ask questions along the way or wait till the end and ask questions? We're open either way.
Mr. Chair, if it's all right, maybe it might just be simpler if we wait till the end, and we can keep the PowerPoint up and toggle back if that would be useful as we go back.
Sounds good. Members, if we can wait till the end with questions, just jot your questions down, and no matter how much time is needed, we have the full committee time in order to answer any and all your questions. So with that being said, if there are no questions before we go forward, any questions before we go forward, members? Seeing none, again, thank you, Deputy Commissioner Rowe, as well as Mr. Norfleet, who's the Director of Paid Leave, of the Paid Leave Program. Thank you both for being here. And once you start your presentation, if you'll be so clear, it's so wonderful to identify your self for the record, and we'll go from there. So I now assume we're starting with Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Yes, we are. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. For the record, my name is Evan Rowe. I am Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And as you mentioned, we are here to provide an update on the operations and rollout of Minnesota's new paid leave program. For our agenda today, we have just a bit of background on the paid leave law itself, talking briefly about the public engagement the program undertook in advance of the rollout of the law, and then Director Norfleet will be speaking about some of the operational details and the implementation details of the paid leave program. So just by way of background on the paid leave law, just as a refresher, Minnesota paid leave was enacted in 2023 and officially began on January 1st of 2026. The law provides job protections and payments from the state to individuals who need time off to care for themselves or to care for their loved ones. Minnesota paid leave is funded by premiums that are made up of contributions from employees and employers, and paid leave sends benefit payments directly to Minnesotans on leave. What does paid leave mean for Minnesota? Well, to start with, it's worth remembering that Minnesota is one of 13 states plus the District of Columbia to enact a paid leave program at the state level. Only 7 countries worldwide do not have some sort of national paid leave program, and the United States is one of those countries. And Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that 73% of American workers lack access to paid family leave. Now Minnesota workers have access to this benefit under Minnesota's paid leave law. States that have implemented paid leave programs have seen stronger employee retention, better health and development outcomes for children, higher labor market attachment for women and labor force participation generally, and greater economic security for families. So this program is one, again, we are one of several states in the country to implement a paid leave program, and these programs have seen significant economic positives when they have been rolled out. As a reminder around coverage under the program, coverage of under Minnesota's paid leave law is quite broad, and it includes the vast majority of workers in the state of Minnesota. That would include full-time and part-time, most seasonal employees. I won't read through the whole list on the top of that box. It's probably faster just to mention who is not covered under the law. Not covered under the law, but can choose to opt in include independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and tribal nations. And not covered but cannot opt in include federal government employees, railroad employees, and then designated seasonal employees. There are two broad buckets of leave under the paid leave law. The first is medical leave. That's leave to care for an individual's own serious health condition. And then there's family leave, and there's a few different types of leave in the law. Bonding is one. That is leave to bond with an individual's child for the first 12 months after the child's birth or placement through adoption or foster care. There's military family leave. That's leave because a family member is on active duty or has been notified of an impending call to duty in the armed forces. Caring leave, or sometimes known as family caring leave, is leave to care for a family member with a serious health condition. And safety leave, that's leave because of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or stalking of an individual or an individual's family member. So within each type of leave, medical leave or family leave, there are a maximum of 12 weeks. If you have a situation where you need to take leave in both buckets, there's a maximum combined leave of 20 weeks under the law within 1 year. Qualifying conditions under the paid leave law must last at least 7 days, and they must be certified by a healthcare provider or another appropriate service provider in the case, for example, of safety leave or military family leave. Paid leave offers partial wage replacement under this program. Lower wage workers get more support. If you earn less, you get a higher percentage of your paycheck that is covered while you are on leave. It's sort of a sliding scale with a few different tranches. The maximum weekly benefit under any event is $1,423 per week. In order to be financially eligible overall, you must have earned at least 5.3% of the statewide average annual wage in the past year. That's about $3,900 in 2026. And payments from unemployment insurance, workers' comp, or Social Security disability insurance will lead to a partial offset or a denial depending on the circumstances of paid leave benefits. Premiums under the law in 2026 are 0.88% of wages for large employers and 0.66% of wages for small employers, and that's inclusive of both the family and medical leave lines of coverage. The premium is applied on wages up to the Social Security cap of about $185,000. First premium payments will be due April 30th of 2026. Generally, premiums are shared between employers and employees. And employers may deduct up to 0.44% from employee paychecks. They're not required to do so, but they may deduct up to 0.44% of wages under the law. Small employers pay a reduced premium under the paid leave law. For small employers, their effective premium rate is 0.66% of wages. That's down from that 0.88%. The reduced employer premium doesn't change the amount that is owed by the employees. So the employer can take that deduction. To qualify, an employer must have 30 or fewer employees and an average employee wage of 150% or less of the statewide average wage. This year, it's about $107,000. Another support for small employers under the law are what are called small employer assistance grants. That's funding that's available to support small businesses if an employee is out on paid leave. Employers can apply for this funding once an employee is approved for paid leave. The paid leave law establishes a funding pool of $5 million per calendar year for this program. Again, to qualify for this program, you must qualify as a small employer under the paid leave law. You have to have incurred these costs. We do it on a reimbursement basis, and funding is not guaranteed, but we will do it until through the $5 million appropriation that we have for this program. The benefits for employers in this regard are up to $3,000 per leave, or a maximum of $6,000 in a calendar year for hiring temporary workers, increasing existing workers' pay, or training workers to cover for an employee on leave. Paid leave also includes employment protections. These protections include job protection. So generally, you must be restored to your job or an equivalent position when you return from leave. That starts within 90 days of an employee's date of hire. Generally, health insurance must be continued, and the applicant and the employer are responsible for the usual premiums. And no retaliation or interference is permitted under the law. Employers must not and cannot interfere against an applicant for applying or using paid leave in good faith. These protections apply no matter how long an individual's been in their job. Equivalent plans, employers can choose to meet their responsibilities under the paid leave law by providing employees an equivalent plan that meets or exceeds the coverage offered by the state. Equivalent plans can be purchased from a private insurance carrier, or employers can choose to self-insure and provide coverage to employees themselves. Employers approved for an equivalent plan must still submit wage detail reports and comply with requirements to notify their employees about their coverage. And we worked closely with the Department of Commerce to certify the equivalent plans. And then just wanted to have one quick moment to touch on the public engagement that the paid leave program has done. I would say it's been, going back to really 2023, it's been a really sustained effort to get out and meet with Minnesotans all across the state. And I would say that the team has worked really hard to have meaningful, constructive, substantive engagement throughout the state. We've got a little map of the progress we made going around the state. We did over 300 engagement activities over the last 2.5 years. Made over 40,000 individual connections. More than half of those were on the employer side, and I see a couple members in this room who were able to join our employer town halls, where I think we got some really good questions, and these questions made I would say, helped strengthen the implementation of the program, and hopefully were educational for folks as they joined. Again, we really tried hard to be all around the state, a combination of virtual and in-person events. And by and large, what we heard from employers is they felt like they knew the law a bit better after they were able to join with us. And I would say that we're continuing to do these types of events, make sure that we are able to provide the information that folks need. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Program Director Greg Norfleet to walk through program implementation details.
Thank you, Deputy
Welcome to the
Commissioner.
committee, and identify yourself for the record and proceed forward with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I am Greg Norfleet. I am the Director for the Paid Leave Program here in Minnesota. Over 2 years ago, I was the first employee of the Paid Leave Division. Under a tight timeline, we were tasked with launching a statewide program to support Minnesotans in some of the most important moments of their lives, from the birth of a child to saying goodbye to a loved one. These moments matter, and it's our goal as a division to ensure that you, as a Minnesotan, can be there when it matters. I've had the privilege of serving in the role of director, and am grateful to be able to lead a team of incredible public servants that are truly committed to this work. You can see a good portion of them on the screen now. Today, I'm going to walk through some of the highlights of the past 2 years of how we built the paid leave program here in Minnesota. Let's start here. Even though we had a tight timeline, we still managed to launch ahead of schedule. Based off of experiences in other states, we knew that new parents would make up a large portion of our initial applications at launch. In other paid leave states, this is lovingly called the baby bump, where parents that welcome a child in their home in 2025 are eligible to take leave in 2026. Our initial launch took place in early November, where we welcomed applications from a small group of large employers that were willing to partner with us. As applications came in, we had the opportunity to work directly with those employers to understand how our system was performing in the real world, and to identify areas that we could improve before opening the doors even further. The success of that first launch allowed us to open the doors wider for new parents across the state in early December. Through the months of November and December, we were able to take in over 7,000 applications from parents across the state. This also provided a unique opportunity for us to test our systems, our processes, and our people as we prepared for the full launch of the program, which occurred on December 29th, again, ahead of schedule. On this next slide, this reflects how we work as a division. We're relentlessly incremental, and we apply lessons along the way, along the way. What this slide attempts to do is to try to lay out the difference between a traditional project management approach and agile development. In a traditional project management approach, you would spend a significant amount of time up front gathering requirements. This could be months, even years of time to try to figure out exactly what you want to build. You would then hand it off to designers to say, this is how we want to implement against those requirements. You would pass it over to your engineering team, your integrations teams, your testing teams, deployments, until you get to a final product that is a big bang deliverable. That big bang oftentimes can be somewhat disappointing because the first time that you're really checking if you built the right thing is at the very end of that process. So instead, the way that we work is that we work small and incremental over time and incorporate feedback from users across the way. We take small pieces where we gather requirements for a small portion of the application or of the whole system up front. And we do the whole series of gathering requirements, building, testing, integrating, and deploying that functionality, and then testing it against the real world, getting feedback. That allows us to get feedback early to see on a smaller scale if we're building the right thing for our end users. That, in this case, the story that you would see is, we thought you wanted a big blue star. After doing a round of testing, we found out actually you wanted a pentagram. After doing some additional testing, you didn't want it in blue, you wanted it in yellow. And then we can scale into a final product that actually meets the need of your users. One example of how we've applied this is through last session when we demonstrated an end-to-end application for a bonding leave, the end-to-end bonding leave application. That demo was an initial building block for the remainder of the applicant experience. We used that demo throughout implementation because it encouraged real, concrete, and tactical feedback from users to help us build a solution that was directly responsive to their needs. This isn't just a good way of making sure that you're building the right thing. It's also a cost-effective way of building a software program or software products. We came in significantly under budget. At the end of this fiscal year, we're anticipating being able to revert over about $70 million back to the trust fund. These savings will revert directly back to the Family and Medical Benefits Trust Fund, meaning that those dollars can go towards helping people during those important moments of their life rather than to building software. Another example of how we can, another big benefit of the way that we work is that it's responsive to change. We can incorporate changes very quickly. Responding to change is an organizational muscle that we built over time. A good example of this is that we needed to react to changing IRS guidance. The IRS issued guidance for state-run paid leave programs around this time last year. That guidance would require a portion of medical leave benefits to be treated as income that's subject to federal taxes, including Social Security and Medicaid. We worked with payroll providers, insurers, and business owners across the state to develop functionality within our employer portal to support compliance with the federal guidance, which was ready to go in advance of our launch. But we got a surprise. At the end of the year, on December 19th, the IRS provided updated guidance. That updated guidance delayed the implementation of the previous guidance by a year. So with less than 10 days before we went live, our team was able to implement a solution preventing overwithholding from applicants and payments. And we do have the solution in hand for when that guidance does go live next year. Our approach leads to high quality, secure, and responsive experiences for Minnesotans, regardless of if they are applicants, employers, or healthcare providers. On the screen is some early feedback that we've heard from a variety of different stakeholders that's overwhelmingly positive about our early launch. But we do remain committed to continuously building on our strong start. We do also receive sometimes more critical feedback, which can help us identify opportunities to continuously improve our service offerings. We meet with employers, healthcare providers, and individual applicants on a regular basis to understand their experiences and to identify ways to improve. One example here is that we launched a fully featured employer portal that provides employers with actionable and transparent information when their employee applies for leave. This was initially presented when an applicant submits a request for leave. The employer is notified, and all of those leave requests were on a single list that was paginated. So you would be able to see 10 at a time, and you would need to search through that pagination in order to find the application that you were looking for. After we launched, we heard feedback from large employers across the state that they needed the ability to identify and search for specific applications. We took that feedback seriously, and we've recently successfully launched a search function within that portal. We're building on that success to allow employers to also be able to sort and filter applications in the near future as well. We did find this picture here is a LinkedIn post that somebody flagged for us, showing the reaction that we got to the employer search tool. Now, as we're building a high-quality solution, we're doing all of this while balancing user experience with a commitment to program integrity. Our program integrity approach includes controls over our people, process, and technology. As the Deputy Commissioner has previously testified, our approach to program integrity does not rely on silver bullets. Instead, we have an overlapping series of controls that leverage information from the employer, the employee, the healthcare provider, and our own administrative data to review each and every application to ensure that the limited funds go towards their intended use. We leverage some pretty cool technology here, including login amend to support identity verification for potential applicants. And we've also begun an exciting pilot in partnership with Fairview Health to support an innovative and secure way for healthcare providers to certify their patients' need for leave that builds on how our partners already work today. 3.5 months into the program, we have received just over 47,000 unique applications and have made over 30,000 determinations, with 2/3 of those being approvals for leave. Out of the gate, the majority of our applications were for bonding leave. But since January, we've seen an uptick in medical leave applications. Combined, these two types of leave account for 90% of our applications. Taking leave for a family member represents just over 10% of our claims volume. Of these, 34% of the caring leave applications were for folks that were taking care of their parents or legal guardians, 29% for their spouse or domestic partner, 29% for their child, 3% for a sibling, 3% for either a grandparent, a grandchild, or a son or daughter-in-law, and then 2% for an individual that does not otherwise fit into one of those above categories, but nevertheless has a response or a reasonable expectation for providing care without compensation. Some additional facts on our claims to date. Most claims are lasting less than the maximum duration of 12 weeks, with an average claim being just under 8 weeks in length. Bonding leaves are averaging 8.7 weeks, medical 6.6, caring leave 5.9 weeks. The majority of leaves, 88%, are taken in a single block of time called continuous leave, while 12% are either intermittent or a reduced schedule. For our Minnesotans that are on leave, 62% are under the age of 40, 69% are female identifying, and 67% work for an employer of 200 or more employees. Our average benefit payment is currently $1,121, which is about 78% of the maximum benefit available under the program. We can say today that the pattern of application mirrors experiences in other states, with demand peaking early out of the gate. The decision to launch early allowed us to take in over 7,000 applications before January 1st, and we saw demand peak on January 2nd, when over 2,000 applications were submitted that day. Since the first week of January, we have seen a week-over-week decrease in claims of between 6 to 10% each week. The early drivers for our program include predictable structural changes, such as the transition for 2025 parents, or transitioning ongoing FMLA caseload onto a paid leave caseload. as well as increased awareness around the program. We are required to work with a qualified actuary each year to assess the premium rate, which will include an analysis of the actual claim experience as well as the balance in the benefits trust fund. That report will conclude by July 1st this year and will balance both our experience as well as the balance, including that $70 million reversion back into the trust fund. With that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present today, and we are prepared to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for that presentation. Before I open it up for questions, I see Senator Elise Mann that is with us. Senator Mann, did you want to say anything? All right, but we wanted to recognize you as the chief architect of this building, of this bill, and we just wanted to appreciate that. All right, what questions? Senator Drahan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for the presentation. On the small employer assistant grant slide here, you talked about what it was, but how many grants have you awarded? I don't think you touched on that. And how much funding is left, I guess would be my two questions on that slide. Thank you.
All right, who wants to answer? And whoever's going to answer, Mr. Norflick.
Thank you, Chair. So far, we've awarded 2 small employer assistance grants. The reason for that is that you need to have incurred costs prior to applying for the grant. We have the way that the process works is that you do first request information from us about the grant program, and we sent that out to over 150 different employers across the state. So there's still a significant balance in that account of $5 million. It's still well over 4.9 million.
Senator Drahan, any follow-up? Any other questions from members? Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions. Some are pretty easy. Hopefully you can give me the information right away. Others are a little more difficult. But what I want, the things I'd like to know right away are how many equivalent plans have been approved? I know that was a concern early on, that the heavy hand perhaps of the state requiring the equivalent plans was going to be difficult, and many employers and their employees like the plans that they were already getting as opposed to what the state was now going to require. And Mr. Chair, you'll remember in this committee we talked about at one point the very significant fines that were going to be placed on small businesses if those equivalent plans were not followed properly. I would hope you've not seen any of that or needed to report any of that lately, but if you can just kind of give me a very brief update on the equivalent plans, and then I'll move on to my other questions.
Mr. Norflick.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Nelson. To date, we've approved over 7,000 equivalent plans across the state. It represents just about 4% of employers across Minnesota, or about 18% of employees that are covered under an equivalent plan rather than the state plan. We do check in with our equivalent plan partners to ensure that they are meeting the requirements of the law, but we haven't had any escalations or any reason to believe that they're not doing that.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. And then a bigger question, would you have any sense about the actuarial stability of the plans? You know, that was one of the things that many of us actually demanded, that there be an actuarial study. This bill started out without even having an actuarial study. So let's talk about, can you give me some sort of idea about what you're seeing as far as our actuarial stability, what was planned and where we are today?
Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Nelson, I'll start, and if Director Norfleet has any additional comments, I'll welcome him to join. Again, as Director Norfleet said in his testimony, things have largely started along the lines of what we would expect. We're not seeing any dramatic differences to what the experience has been in other states, and those experiences in other states formed a large chunk of the basis for the projections done by Milliman as part of their actuarial analyses. So again, it is early days in the program, but I would say with a month and a half under our belts, we're not seeing anything that's, again, radically out of step with what the root of those projections were. It's been busy, to be sure, and Minnesotans are excited about the program, to be sure. Obviously, as we go through these next few months and we get more data, then and as we engage in a subsequent actuarial analysis, we will know more, and we'll look forward to sharing the results of those as we get farther through the year. At this point, though, there's no nothing that suggests that we're in uncharted territory or anything like that. It's running more or less how we'd expect it would.
Thank you.
Mr. Norfleet, anything that you want to add there before we go back to Senator Nelson?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that report. On the other hand, I was very glad to see that there was $70 million below appropriations needed. Now my question gets to the actuarial piece of that, as far as, okay, so there's $70 million that were appropriated that weren't needed for, I think that was the startup, the implementation. I want to know how those dollars now are going to be used, and can they be used, that's a significant chunk of change, and can they be used to hold down, or I would think maybe the cost to employees or employers, or what's your plans, or what are you thinking about that $70 million of saved implementation costs?
I'm going to go to Mr. Rowe, because if they don't have an idea what to do with that $70 million, I have some ideas.
I do too.
Mr. Rowe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe the money is spoken for under the law, in that it is automatically returned to the Family and Medical Benefit Insurance account, to the paid leave trust account. So that will, I am sure, be a factor that the actuaries, as they do the analysis, factor in as we go through. And again, I would offer my compliments and appreciation for the hard work of the team that was able to deliver this substantially under the implementation budget that was originally forecast.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I just have two more
Senator
questions.
Nelson.
I'll be
Go
very
ahead.
brief.
This is the time that we have for it. Senator Nelson.
Thank you so much. Tell me about the $5 million a year for funding grants for small business employers' cost. I'd like to know more about that. Are those employers, are they registered with the state? I'd like to just know more about that and those costs. I don't actually recall that part that we discussed very much in our committee as we passed this, but maybe I just missed it. Can you talk about that $5 million and how we can ensure that it actually gets to employers who actually had real costs for this mandated program?
Senator Nelson, from my understanding, it's the $5 million that's there, that is accessible, that the employer has to demonstrate that they have incurred the cost or expense, and then it is submitted. There's two up to this particular point. They are anticipating more because it requires for the employer to spend the money before asking to be reimbursed by way of that $5 million. But that's my opinion. That's what I understand. Who am I going to?
I can take it.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Nelson. Yes, this is the same program that Senator Draheim was just asking about in his previous question. So it's small employer assistance grants, and again, the purpose of those grants is to, I think there's recognition that for small employers, it can be helpful for them to have a little bit of financial assistance if they have an employee who's out on leave. So the small employer assistance grant is meant to help a small business that may need to pay somebody overtime to cover shifts if somebody's out on leave, or may need to retrain a staff member to take on additional duties, right? Offer a bonus, things like that. So that provision was funded with $5 million under the paid leave law. As Director Norfleet said, we've received a couple applications, but we expect that to expect that to substantially increase in the coming weeks as more small employers may have eligible expenses under that provision, but happy to answer any additional questions.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, on that piece, certainly, I'm a small business owner. I understand the costs, but what I would ask is, how do we know that, are these small businesses Are they registered with the Secretary of State? Are we looking at 1099s or W-2s, or I'm not sure. I just would want to know, what are those metrics to know that the dollars are actually going to the intended targets and not being frittered away or frauded, defrauded? So what are the metrics in place to make sure these really go where they need to go?
Mr. Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Nelson. So under the paid leave program, a small employer has to meet 2 requirements. The first is that the employer has 30 or fewer employees. The second is that their average employee makes less than 150% of the statewide average weekly wage. This test is applied based off of unemployment insurance information. And it is the basis that we use to set the small employer rate as well. So it's the same population that's getting the small business premium rate is also eligible for this funding. When they go through the application process, they do need to set up an account in SWIFT in order to be paid as a vendor of the state. It is grant funding, so there is a robust process around evaluating the applications.
Senator Nelson, any follow-up?
Oh, no, I will just, I still have a few questions about that specifically, but we'll deal with that later. I know about the SWIFT process, but I do think it's important that Minnesotans know that these dollars are going to those businesses for which they were intended. And so I appreciate the latitude to ask some of these questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator Paz.
Thank you, Chair Champion. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, are employers required to notify employees, and how do we make sure that they do? And is there like a required workplace poster or something that, or something that's been created by deed as a template to make sure that employers are following the same guide when they're notifying their employees about this benefit? Because I do believe there are some employees who don't know this benefit exists.
Mr. Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Fa. Yes, there is a requirement that employers notify employees of the program in 2 ways. They need to hang a workforce poster that we've created, and we translated into multiple languages as well. So I believe it's available in at least 20 languages on our website. That can be downloaded. Whether you're covered by the state plan or a private plan, we have posters for both of those scenarios for employers to notify them. The other is that they need to notify each employee in writing, either 30 days following the date of, 30 days from the date of hire or 30 days before premium collection begins. We created a model notification template, again, in multiple languages, that is available for download on our website.
Senator Paz, any follow-up?
Thank you, Senator Champion. One more question, and thank you for that answer. So I see on, I don't have a page number, but on the page where it says applications submitted versus applications that were approved, I'm wondering, of the applications that were submitted and those that are approved, it looks like half of them were approved. Wondering what the reason for, some of the top reasons for denials, whether it be eligibility issues, or was it incomplete documentations, or what were some of those top reasons for denials?
Mr. Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair Champion. Thank you, Senator Pa. The top reasons for denials, at the very top of the list is that employers who are covered by a private plan submit applications to the state plan instead. So we deny those applications and tell them to apply against their private carrier. Otherwise, we've had a few, the next biggest category is incorrect documentation that doesn't support the request.
Okay.
Senator Paz, any follow-up?
No, that's it. Thank you, Senator.
I'm
or
going to
Chair.
Thank you. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for answering some of the questions that we had sent earlier. But when you were talking about the average leave duration taken in your slides, how does the actual leave times that folks are taking, how does that compare to what you anticipated they were going to take?
Mr. Rowe, and then we'll go to Mr. Norfleet, just in case he has any follow-up. Mr. Rowe.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Housley. Again, broadly in line with what the actuarial projections suggested, both in terms of the weekly payments and the average leave duration. And I would also note that these leave durations are pretty consistent with the experiences in other states. Bonding leave tends to be probably the highest, the highest length of leave. Medical and caring leaves are shorter for reasons you can probably imagine, right? Medical conditions are more variable. So it's, again, broadly in line with what the actuarial projection showed.
Thank you.
Mr. Norfleet, any follow-up?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a scenario. Under the paid leave program, parents can take up to 12 weeks of bonding leave during the first 12 months after their child's birth. And this includes leave taken for a child born, adopted, or placed in foster care in 2025. But, for example, parents who welcomed a child on June 14th, 2025, would have between January 1st, 26th, and June 13th, 2026. But a parent who welcomes a child on, say, March 1st would only have from January 1st to March 1st, 2026. So they wouldn't actually get the full 12 weeks, they would only get 8. Are you anticipating that there may need to be a change to accommodate those who aren't getting the full 12 weeks?
Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Housley, just to make sure I'm understanding the scenario, so you offered one where a child was born June 14th, 2025. The other scenario was a child was born March 1st, 2025 or 2026?
Senator Housley.
2026, sorry.
Oh, 2026, okay. Well, thank Mr. Chair.
2025, March 1st, 2025.
Oh, okay, so.
Looking at my notes.
Okay.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're
I
clear
know.
on the scenario. Okay, so do you feel like you got a clear understanding of the scenario?
I believe I do, Mr. Chair,
All
but
right,
Senator
Mr. Rowe.
Housley can correct me if I get it wrong. So the bonding leaves provision is up to, you can take bonding leave up to 1 year from the date of the placement or the birth of the child, right? So it's sort of a rolling look back window. So I don't think any changes are needed per se, because I think the concept is that the bonding leave is meant by policymakers to be available for that first year of the child's life. And as we go forward, children that were born in 2026, you can take that full, they'll have that full year. But I think that more or less is working as intended. Is there something behind the question though?
Well, so if the baby
Senator Housley.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. If the baby were born March 1st, 2025, they only get till March 1st, 2026. If they start the leave the January of 2026, they don't get the full 12.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And again, I think the idea is it's based on that 1 year look back, right? And that bonding is meant to be for the first year of the child's life.
Senator Housley, any follow-up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have another question. Thank you for clarifying that. How long does it take to process an application for paid leave?
Mr. Rowe, and then we'll go to Mr. Norfleet if something else needs to be answered.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Housley, and I'll let the director add a little bit more context here. But again, I'd say we're processing most applications within a couple weeks. Now it can take a little bit longer if we need more information from the applicant to be able to complete the application, right? It's very important, as we were discussing in terms of program integrity, that we have the correct and accurate information from the applicant and from the employer and from all parties under the paid leave law before we pay claims. So, I would say that, we're generally able to process these within about 2 weeks. However, if we don't have the application information that we need, then we have to ask the applicant for some additional information to be able to have confidence that it's an approvable claim and we can adjudicate it appropriately. And I know we've also kind of talked through a few things that make it faster for applicants that I might turn it over to Director Norfleet to talk
Mr.
through.
Norfleet,
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the quickest way to get into an approval or to get a quick decision on your application, there's three big things that you can do. The first is to verify your identity through Login MN using the step up, the IAL2 step up, where we ask you to provide a selfie along with your driver's license. The second is to make sure that you talk to your employer beforehand. We do give employers 7 days to respond to a request for information on every single application. Employers can respond to that within a minute of the application being submitted. And if you do that, then we can continue the adjudication process at that time as well. And then last, and possibly most importantly, making sure that you have the correct certification filled out completely and uploaded to your case. That is the most common type of request for information that we issue, is just making sure that your, whether it's an FMLA form or it's our own form, is fully filled out and signed by a healthcare provider. Then those three things will definitely expedite your claims decision.
Senator Housley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there an average time?
You want that for Mr. Norfleet?
Yes.
Because you're the director. Is there average time, Mr. Norfleet?
I can look it up.
I think, yeah, we want to make sure that we get you the right number, but.
Okay, Mr. Chair,
Senator Housley?
I'll go to my next question while he's looking that up, if
Yeah.
that's okay. And it's on that spotlight slide you have up right there.
Oh, great.
And you went over also the percentage of those that were leaving to care for a parent or a sibling or a grandparent. Can you email that information to us, because it's not on the slide? And then also the question that Senator Pa asked about the reason for denials, that would be great to have too. Thank you.
Mr. Rowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we'd certainly be happy to provide that additional information.
Thank you. And then whenever, Mr. Chair, whenever they get the average time, that's great.
It looks like Mr. Norfleet is still looking for that information. So while he's doing that, I'll go to our next questioner, and then we'll come back to make sure that we get the answer for Senator Housley. Is that okay?
Yep.
Senator Housley? Senator Pratt, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to follow up on some of the questions my peers had. Just real quick, so again, we're at roughly 48,000 unique applications. Again, can you tell me what determined is defined as?
Mr. Rowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Pratt, that determined means either approved or denied, or the applicant withdrew the application.
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so if I look, it looks like we've got about a 67, 2/3 approval rate. Is that about right?
Mr. Rowe or Mr. Norfleet?
Thank you, Chair. That's currently right, yes.
Thank you. And
Senator Pratt?
thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I were to extrapolate out all of the applications that have been submitted in these first roughly 6 weeks, we would see about 31,000 applications approved if all the applications were decisioned. Is that correct? 2/3 of 48,000?
Mr. Rowe?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I think extrapolating, yeah, that's probably about right. Now, again, we review each application on the merits, and but I think broadly speaking, that's the ballpark.
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Chair, I'm concerned because that would mean that we processed about 25% of the applications or the claims in the first 6 weeks of the program. So basically in the first 10% of the year, we have approved or will approve 25% of the total claims expected for the year. And I'm concerned that we're not, that while we expected some sort of bump, I don't think, when I look at the actuarial report, we had only expected about 2,000 additional claims for the year. So it wasn't picked up in the actuarial report.
Anyone want to answer that? Mr. Rowe?
I can start, Mr. Chair and Senator Pratt. So I think one thing that is worth noting, and again is consistent with experience in other states, is in the first year of claims, you have a weighting towards that first month or so of program activity where you are catching up on the 2025, where you have the 2025 babies for bonding leave, and you also have a pretty significant level of applications from folks with pre-existing healthcare conditions. I think Director Norfleet referenced this on the last slide where he talked about, noting that there are many employers that have FMLA caseloads that are migrated over to the paid leave program. So overall, it's actually pretty normal in other states to see a couple months, of straight line volume in those first months of program operations. And so by and large, it's roughly where we would expect it to be. It's naturally something that we're going to continue to monitor closely for the sustainability of the program. But I would say it's not dissimilar from experiences in other states, and it was certainly I think a known factor in any actuarial analysis that's based on the experience in the other states.
Mr. Norfleet, do you want to comment as to what was just stated? Is that okay? And then can you tell us if you found the information about the average length of time for the processing of applications?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So Deputy Commissioner's right on that out of the gate, you should expect a fairly significant bump as we're dealing with 2025 parents, as well as folks transitioning their FMLA caseload onto the paid leave program. And like I said, we are experiencing a 6 to 10% decrease week over week for applications coming in the door. We may need to come back on the exact numbers for the average time to a decision. Currently, the number that I've got is between the launch of the program and February 15th, that it's about 13.8 days to a decision.
All right, and I know the Senator Housley is not here, so if someone can make sure that we provide her that information, that would be great. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I look back at the actuarial report, the startup cost, about 65%, 63% of the claims were expected to be medical. We're only running at 44, and as the data shows, medical leaves tend to be shorter than other leaves. Can you explain how you expect to, what's the impact on the dollars paid out, given that the number of claims or the mix of claims is so much different and skew higher than what the actuarial report had suggested?
Mr. Rowe, Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Pratt, I think this is probably the nature of having a point in time on February 15th, right? So the first set of claims that programs will get are it's heavily weighted towards those 2025 bonding claims. We have already seen, our inbound claim volume now is roughly, I want to say from memory, it's over half medical claims now. I think maybe about a third bonding, maybe 10% family. So there's essentially a line that the kind of trend line has already changed and really was changing already back in mid-January. But because these are cumulative numbers that we're sharing with you, it makes the bonding leave claims look overweight. They are overweight at the beginning of the program. They will come, as a proportionate share, they will come down over time until I would expect we see the, a balance that is more similar to what was projected in the actuarial analysis.
Mr. Norfleet?
Thank you, Chair. As Deputy Commissioner said, out of the gate, for the first 2 months during our soft and our beta launch, it was 100% bonding leave claims. So through November and December, we were dealing 100% with bonding leave. Now we're getting a mix, and over the course of January and February, it is mostly medical leave claims coming in today.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the $70 million in implementation savings, you had provided to Milliman that your startup costs were going to be $128.5 million. Is that about right?
Mr. Rowe?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I think, and so the number that was in the Milliman study was based on SF2, right, and the appropriations that were allocated in there, right. It was just a statement of what was in the law. I believe the actual total was 165 if you factor in the first half of fiscal 26. But yes, but that's those numbers are directly sourced from the amounts allocated in SF2 in Chapter 59 of Laws 23 that was then available to the department for implementation.
And I went back to
Senator
the
Pratt.
fiscal note, and that was, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I went back to the fiscal note, and that's about right. So you spent less than half of the amount of money needed. Where did that savings come from?
Mr. Rowe?
Mr. Chair, we're probably close to half. I'm not sure we're quite more than half, but but I would say it came from really thoughtful and careful program design by Director Norfleet and the paid leave team. And I think really what it came down to were a few different things. And I think Director Norfleet could probably take up a whole hearing talking about this, but a few points. One is, I think, close management of technology costs. And savings from leveraging existing technology that we already have, right? Being able to leverage, for example, the unemployment insurance wage detail system was, I think, a win in many ways. One, it was simpler for employers and made it easier for them to interact with the program. Two, it had serious program integrity value by interlinking the data between the two programs. But three, also, it was an economical way to deliver the wage detail and premium collection functionality. That's I think one really great example. Another example would just be being really thoughtful about the scope that the team used in contracting out technology, using good contractual vehicles to make sure that those costs were rigorously managed and very carefully managed. And I think another piece I would just say is being really thoughtful about hiring when it's timing the hiring so that you have as great efficiency as possible in terms of the overall implementation of the program. And this is an area where I think we're fortunate to be able to learn from the experiences of other states, seeing how they did it and taking what worked and leaving aside what didn't. I mean, obviously, Director Norfleet, being the deputy director in Massachusetts, also provided a great deal of practical experience in that regard that I think the people of Minnesota have been lucky to benefit from. I don't know, Director Norfleet, if you'd had any other elements you would want to add?
Director Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair Champion. Thank you, Senator Pratt. I think the other thing that I would point to is that we didn't outsource the entirety of the development process. We've been the beneficiaries from extraordinary partnership across the state, both from the UI division, Minute, as well as building our own product management team. So we partnered directly with the vendor so that we didn't just turn over the roadmap to them. We didn't outsource our brains as we were building this. And that meant that we had a really close partnership. We knew exactly what we needed to build, and we were able to do it in a really cost-effective way.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Chair, I'm a little bit concerned that, one, we're claiming savings expense for expenses that haven't come. If Mr. Rowe is correct in saying that the expenses that he's using as a baseline are 165 million versus the 128 that was in the fiscal note, and that was in the Milliman study. And he has effectively just increased the cost of the program startup, or at least the budget, 37 million. He's claiming twice that in savings. It reminds me of when we started talking about the premium going from 0.7 to 0.77 without ever coming in front of the legislature, without ever going through a fiscal note. That the department just arbitrarily changes the basis from which they make these claims. And so I find that concerning, Mr. Chair, that we can't seem to get a straight and consistent baseline for how these numbers are coming across and claiming a $70 million savings when it appears to me it's not really true. And, you know, I've heard from, you know, many people in my district, particularly those that, you know, we're a hospitality area. We have a lot of seasonal workers, that the seasonal aspect of this has been very difficult to implement. I shared with the department over the interim that people were getting charged or being told they were going to be charged the maximum amount when it was 3-4 times the amount that they took out of their businesses as a salary. A couple of people were LLCs. They were told they were going to have to pay the their tax was going to be based on the $185,000 number when they only paid themselves maybe $60,000 a year. I don't know that the implementation went all that smoothly. I think there were a lot of questions, and I'm very concerned with what we're getting. I mean, even if we look at, you know, even if we look at the 73% of Americans lacked access to paid leave. We didn't have, you know, I was on the board of a long-term care facility. We didn't have a policy around that. We worked with our employees to make sure they got what they needed. If they needed 100% for 8 weeks, they got 100% for 8 weeks. If they needed 12 weeks off, we worked with them. If they needed 2 weeks off, we worked with them. And in fact, if you'll recall, Mr. Chair, back in 2023, when we first started talking about this bill, the chamber said about 80% of small business employees were covered by some sort of paid leave, whether it was formal or informally documented. So I'm concerned that we don't have consistency around that statistic either, and the department seems to continue to, I think, overstate how many employees weren't covered by these programs in the past. So I think if we look between the number of claims that have been submitted versus the actuarial study, which did account for a increase in the number of claims year one, we're going to see a significant, we're only going to be expecting 2,000 claims a week to be approved going out here for the rest of the year. We've got 100,000 claims left to go here between now and the end of the year. We've got the administration and the agency changing the basis of the cost of this program and claiming that as a savings and claiming expenses that haven't even been accounted for. Mr. Chair, one more question, if I may.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you. The original expectation was you were going to hire over 400 new employees. How many do you have?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
If I can first, Mr. Chair, just respond to a couple of Senator Pratt's points earlier, and then I'll pass it over to Director Norfleet just on the full-time equivalent question. So just to potentially clarify the item on the numbers, if you're referring to the fiscal note, I believe fiscal notes generally only project in biennium costs, and that would have been fiscal 24 and 25. That's the 128.5. Then in the tails, there would have been a half-year allocation in fiscal 26 from 7/1 to 12/31/25, the first half of fiscal 26, which was about the other, which was, I believe, the 40 point from memory, 3 million, which was, again, the final set of implementation costs that would have been allocated to the department for that purpose. So just to try to clarify that, I think that that's the basis, and I think that's a consistent basis that's been reported to the legislature all along. Also, just in terms of the 73% of American workers, that's not us stating that. That is the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's a reference, I think, in the slide that I'd be happy to send a link to the study if that would be of service. I'll pass it over to Director Norfleet, with your permission, Mr. Chair, to answer the full-time equivalent question.
And if you could send us that information about that study, because obviously that would be helpful so that we can all be on the same wavelength. Director Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, we have 330 folks within the division.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm looking at the Milliman report here right now, and as of 2026, it shows 0 in startup costs. So I'll respectfully disagree with Mr. Rowe. And I looked back at the fiscal note, and I didn't see those classified as startup costs. So thank you.
All right, we're going to go to Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. My first question is, obviously there are a number of large businesses and corporations who reside here but also have locations in other states that have paid leave. What do they think of the rollout so far?
Who would like to take that?
Oh, well, I was going to, I'll start.
All right. Deputy Commissioner Rowe, and then I'll go to Director Norfleet.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Mohammed, thanks for the question. I mean, I think again, the program's really prioritized serious engagement with all, with employers of all sizes, all roles in the state's economy. This is obviously a really important, it's a really important thing, and it's a big change, right? This is a big change for employers, and I think we definitely recognize that. I will say, I think we've gotten overall some very positive feedback from some of the large employers in the state. I think one recently told the program, they have operations in all the states with state paid leave programs, and they said that Minnesota's rollout has been the smoothest. Now, I'm not saying that that's a 100% representative sample, but it was certainly something that we were really happy to hear about, and I think that's partly due to the really strong work of Director Norfleet and his team. I think it's also because we've been able to learn from other states around what has worked and what hasn't worked, and hopefully try to take what works and leave behind what hasn't. But I will say that overall, again, it is a big change, recognizing that. But I think this program has, at every step, sought to prioritize serious engagement and listening, and hopefully, I'm hopeful that those results are being felt by our employer community.
Director Norfleet.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Mohammed. I think that it's just worth thanking the Minnesota employers that have been engaged with us throughout the implementation effort. They've made our program stronger. They have given us ideas and feedback throughout, and I think that has contributed to a really strong rollout for employers across the state. We have gotten positive feedback, including some of the stuff that we put on slide 21 from employers across the state, as well as folks from the insurance industry, payroll providers, healthcare providers. We've taken engagement really seriously, and we're really thankful that employers across the state were willing to engage with us in the way that they were.
Senator Mohammed, any follow-up?
Yep, just a few. And then you said something earlier that I think is really important when you were speaking with Senator Pratt, when answering one of his questions, which is you talked a little bit about that obviously you've had thousands of applications, which shows the need that people have for this program. Can you talk a little bit about the merits of each individual who's applying for this?
Who wants to take that?
And have you had any folks that you've denied?
Mr. Chair, Senator Mohammed, if I could just clarify,
Commissioner
can I just,
Rowe?
sorry, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, in terms of, have we denied any applications for the program? So yes, I mean, we have, right? And that is because, we take program integrity very seriously here. And if an application doesn't meet, the standard that is established in the paid leave law, right, the department will deny an application because that is the law and because it is important for us to uphold the integrity of the program. Now, with that being said, I think this program is already, we, I think, are hearing of the really positive impact it is making in Minnesotans' lives and what it means for them to be able to take time to bond with their child, what it means for them to not have to worry about making rent and paying medical bills because they've had an unexpected serious illness or serious health condition, right? To be able to care for an aging loved one when they are facing a serious familial issue, right? I think we're already starting to hear some of those positive stories and what that means for Minnesotans.
Thank you.
Mr. Norfleet, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Typically, people call us on either the best day or the worst day of their lives. And for new parents, we're really excited to be able to tell them that they have time to spend time with their child. For folks that are facing a serious healthcare condition or have a family member that's facing a serious healthcare condition, we really want you to be able to heal or be with that person instead of dealing with complex bureaucracy wherever possible.
Senator Mohammed?
We really care about the program. We really care about the impact that it's going to have on the state of Minnesota, and we're all very grateful for the opportunity to work on it.
Now, Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, over the last 3 years, as we've debated this bill, we very often talk about the impacts it has on small businesses, and it's going to destabilize our economy. But I think what I hear a lot from my constituents, at least in the last few months, have been new parents who are saying, I get to spend more time with my child for the first time, or people who are suffering from cancer who are saying, I get to go home and be able to get the treatment that I need without having to worry about my job. And I think it's really important for also people to know that, they talked a little bit about this, but 67% of the folks who do qualify work for employers with 200+ employees. These are folks who can afford it. I think there's ways to always make the program better, but I just want to take a moment and just thank you for the work that you're doing. It's important.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up a little bit to Senator Housley's question about the increase in leave. I missed that part. So, she was talking about how some parents are going to get 12 weeks or 8 weeks for bonding. What is the expected ramp up once we have a full calendar year to be eligible? Do we have birth rate statistics, or how do we, and then what percentage of the birth rate do you expect for, adoption and births, I guess, to participate in the program?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, so just maybe, is this a question about, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Is this about how leave duration would change in 2026 as you have as they have a full year of eligibility? Or is it more about general expected leave taking behavior with bonding leave? I just want to make sure.
And just for clarity, Senator Draheim, because I think the beginning part of what Senator Housley was concerned about was someone who has a baby in March of 2025, and that person would be able to stay with that child from a bonding perspective until March 2026, and then there was a shorter period of time. And I think what they were referring to under what Senator Housley was talking about is the child, that is really the first year of the child, and that's how that calculation is done. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I guess kind of building on the average leave time, we're missing out on some of that 12 months.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? So are you expecting the bonding to be consistent at 8.7 weeks moving forward? I guess would be a better way of asking the question. And the same with the medical. Is that the standard for these types of programs to be 9 months, et cetera, or weeks?
I see.
Mr. Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, thank you for the clarification. Just wanted to make sure got it right. We wouldn't expect the numbers to change around that much, just because, particularly because, while we certainly do have some folks from early 2025 who are applying, they're not the majority of applicants to the program. And the 8.7 weeks, again, it might tick up by 0.1, 0.2. It could tick down 0.1, 0.2. It's generally in line with the trends, with, I think, the overall projections from the actuarial analysis. It's generally in line with trends in other states. Again, it'll probably move around a little bit, but I don't think it's out of line with what we'd expect. And I wouldn't expect a specific change attributable to the end of the 2025 baby bump.
Director Norfleet, is there anything you'd like to clarify, or you?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Champion. Thank you, Senator Draheim. It would depend on the mix of applications that we get in the door. Typically, birth-giving parents take a longer time than non-birthing parents, so there is like that dimension of it. But this is generally in line with what we've seen in other states. The majority of leaves are shorter than you would think in duration.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you. Next is the time from application to being denied or approved. And maybe you mentioned it before, Chair, if we could get a timeline on what the average has been.
I think I heard him say 13 point something days, 13.8 days, but I want to make sure that I'm correct, or that's the right information. Director Norfleet.
That's correct, Senator Champion. From the start from November through February 15th, 13.8 days.
Senator Draheim, any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Director. I had an email from a constituent that put an application in on January 21st, and as of last week had not been approved yet, and I believe that was sent to whoever the contact is by my legislative assistant. So I will follow up on that, because that should be processed by now, you would think, if it only takes normally 2 weeks, and it's been a month and 2 days.
So it's my understanding, based on what the testimony's been, is that that number could move if they're asking for clarifying information, and if there's additional things that they need from the applicant. But I'll let Deputy Commissioner Evan Rowe speak to that, and then Mr. Norfleet.
No, Mr. Chair, absolutely right. Again, I think oftentimes the issue might just be we needed to hear back from the applicant. They needed to modify their application. With that being said, we're of course happy to follow up offline if there is something that's gotten in the way.
Director Norfleet, anything?
Nothing to add.
Senator Draheim, and then I'll go to you, because Senator Housley, because I saw that you were trying to get something clarified, or you had another question, but I'll go to Senator Draheim.
Thank you. And the next one has to do with my local ski hill that hires all temporary workers, and they were disappointed they weren't exempt from having to pay into the paid family medical leave. Hire mainly kids, young adults. Obviously a short window. In southern Minnesota, it's shorter than anywhere else in the state for keeping good snow and keeping open, of course. Is there any discussion on changing the policy right now so that they would be exempted for paid family medical leave? They were told they weren't able to qualify because they didn't offer lodging. And I don't think that was the intent of the original amendment or change in the original bill. So any thoughts on that?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Draheim, I can just as far as the seasonal hospitality exclusion goes, the law, so this is not an area where the department is not, this is not an area where the department has, this is not an area where we have leeway per se, right? The law is very clear about what are defined as seasonal hospitality businesses under the paid leave law. And there's a delineation in the statute of what specific types of businesses are eligible to receive that seasonal designation. I think you're correct that one of them is hotels, another is kind of resorts. I don't think if we're talking about a ski hill, I don't think ski hills is listed in the list of seasonal businesses that is contained within that narrow the narrow seasonal worker exclusion under the law. It certainly is, it's a question for the legislative bodies to contemplate, I suppose, but it's defined in statute, and we don't have flexibility under the law to view it differently.
Senator Drahan?
Thank you, Chair. Would you support me offering a bill to have, I mean, if you think about it, if you have lodging, you probably can have a longer window to be open than a ski hill in southern Minnesota. So is that something you think the agency would support?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe?
Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim, we would be very happy to provide technical assistance on drafting any such language to ensure that it does what you want it to do, but I don't think I could opine on the support or opposition to such a amendment at this time.
Senator Drahan?
Okay, thank you, and plan on one bill coming soon. And then I guess the last thing is, we've had a lot of discussion, Chair, thank you, and I'll be done after this one. And pre-launch the program, a lot of talk about how this is going to affect, small businesses, our schools, law enforcement, et cetera. But, one thing that, it's come to my attention, and I guess remembering back, I did hear about it before, are like the training programs, like apprentice programs for like a journeyman. And those apprentices rely on the journeyman or master electrician, et cetera. And you can't just fill that in. It's pretty hard to find those qualifications for certain industries. And the trickle-down effect of that in an area where we're already short in rural Minnesota, especially tradesmen, and then we have extensive training guidelines for new workers in some fields, like journeymen, to apprentices, and there's one journeyman for 2 apprentices, or whatever the formula might be, depending on the industry. And that is affecting job sites from what I've been told, when people take leave. And obviously, I know it's more complicated than that, but I just wanted to make sure the committee understood that, the effects in the rural area where we don't have a lot of bodies, it does make it difficult for some, not just the employer, but whoever is trying to get whatever built. And then, of course, that affects, suppliers, the restaurants, the hotels, et cetera. So anyway, I'm rambling. I appreciate your time, both of you.
All right, I'm going to go to Senator Housley for your question, if you have one.
I do, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I was just thinking of this when I was sitting here, because I have heard from quite a few small businesses in my district that are struggling because of this new premium that they have to pay. And I see that their first premiums are due April 30th. What happens if they just can't pay it?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Housley, I mean, it's similar provisions to, unemployment insurance or any, other responsibilities you might have to the Department of Revenue, right? There are penalties prescribed for not filing in a timely manner and not meeting one's obligations under the law in a timely manner. We certainly want everybody to do that. We aim for compliance first, but just as any program needs to have a legal framework to ensure compliance with the law, paid leave has such a framework.
Follow-up, Senator Housley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I will wait until April 30th, and then maybe we can get the numbers in to see how many missed it, because I know they're struggling right now, so I just want to make sure that, heads up.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Housley. I'm going to go to Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one comment, but then 3 brief things I want to tell you that that I'm hearing from my district as well, and I think it's important for the department to know them. Number one, though, this, it's really interesting to me that unemployment insurance, which is kind of a little bit what this is modeled after, in a sense of how it's rolled out, those taxes are deductible business expenses, I believe. So I'm a little bit curious as to why the new mandate for paid family medical leave, I understand that's a federal thing, but of course in Minnesota, we don't have a rolling tax conformity. We have to determine, so obviously I'll take that to the tax committee. Hopefully we will not conform with that issue. But the three things that I'm hearing from my district are this interaction between like someone who was on disability at the end of the year, and now we've moved into this new year, and how does that correlate with paid family medical leave? I know there's a brief bullet on your sheet about that, and I know I talked with your commissioner, I talked with you, Assistant Commissioner Rowe, on this. So I want you to know what's happened so far, is that my constituent has tried to call that number that he was given, but he said it just took too long and he had to hang up. So there, in that particular case, at that particular time, it was a very time issue to be able to get that question. So I want you to know that question's still out there, and I'm sure that my constituent is not the only one that has that interaction problem. But the other thing that I think we cannot lose sight of is the sub-problem. This is the problem with people, more people who are taking paid family medical leave than would have been absent other times. And what we're seeing in that uptick in absences and what that's costing, or the services that aren't being delivered. For example, bus drivers, these kids still have to get to school. So these kind of things are a problem, and I don't have the answer, but we're seeing that, and what we're seeing and it's not just me and my constituents, 200 mayors signed a similar letter regarding the cost to local units of government, one, to fund mandated paid family medical leave, and then secondly, the cost to get substitutes in and trained to fill those jobs. So I just want to bring that to your attention, that continues to be a problem. And so I don't expect an answer, but I think you need to be aware that those are two issues that are continuing to plague my constituents and probably constituents everywhere. And of course, the local units of government like the school districts, the cities, the counties, of course, where do they pay for that? Obviously, that's through property taxes. So our constituents are seeing their property taxes go up to pay for those local unit of government costs. So just want to be aware of that, and I think we all should be aware of that issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions before I close out this session? Well, a couple things. One, I want to say thank you both for being here, providing the committee with substantive information. Thank you also for what I know you're going to do as it pertains to any follow-up that has been identified that you are going to do. I also appreciate on the page where you say what we've heard, what we've built. One is, I like the fact that you're continuing to improve your service even after the launch. That's something that you all have committed to. And I like the fact that you regularly meet with employers, applicants, and healthcare providers to hear their feedback and find ways to make the service even better. Because to me, that means that we are committed to an ongoing notion of improving ourselves. I have this saying that says there's always room for improvement. So I like the fact that you are continuing to do that, and that you'll release improvements every week so that you're being responsive in real time. So that's great. And I want to just say that I'm thankful for you all being here. You all know that I don't mind criticizing DEED when I need to, and I'm certain that Devin Baldry is probably back there somewhere. Think, oh, there he is over there with that tie on, trying to cover his face. I see that happening. He knows that I will do so, and so I'm sure he thinks that is an understatement. but I'm also willing to give credit when credit is due. That when people are doing a great job and they are putting Minnesotans before our own individual ideas, that's important. I know that there was a lot of speculation about how disastrous that it would be, that you all would be unresponsive, that the website would crash. I had that, nightmare in my mind and in my dreams, and I want you to know that I do think you all are doing a good job and that you deserve a lot of credit for how effectively that you wrote out this significant program. We will see later if there are challenges or if there's something else that we need to respond to in real time. And so I just want to be thankful that you are at least looking at other states, and whether that's Washington State or where you've come from, Massachusetts, or anyone else or any other state, in order to improve our conditions here. So great job. Thank you for that. And so two last things. Members, that concludes our business for this meeting. Our next hearing will be on Wednesday, February 25th, and which will be an informational hearing on the economic impact of Operation Metro Surge and ICE on our state. We've been hearing from a cross-section of people around business, and so our focus will be around business, not the political notions of it, but what impacts it has happened to our state. The second thing is I want you also to put on your calendar, we're looking at doing a community legislative hearing, like our hearing, but in the community. Because I think that's important to think about bringing our committee to the community. So the date that we have for that, Tom is going to tell us what we have right now, and that can improve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The date we're looking for that is March 23rd, which will be a Monday.
And it'll be an evening, so probably 5 to 7. So if you could put that on your calendar, that would be great. If there's something that doesn't work about that, please let us know, because we are always, looking for feedback. Senator Housley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Which community?
What is community?
No, which community? You said in community.
I
but
got it.
I'm like, where?
All community, well, I'm looking at my.
In your
district.
community?
Yeah, in my district, but they're your community too, because we are all human beings and we are all joined by our wonderful human spirit. But if there's a suggestion for another, I'm always open to that as well. Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to note, there are a few of us who live further away, and we stay up here during the week, but we look forward to going home on Thursday night if we don't have session. So it is maybe possible that there might be a date that would be more conducive to those of us who stay up here during the week and drive home on Thursday. Thank you.
Just so you know, the date that we have right now is a Monday, and we would also explore a Wednesday so that you can go home, because I understand the importance of going home. And I know you live in Rochester, and my family and my sister and others live in Rochester, so I know how much time it takes you to get home. All right? Senator Hurd.
Chair Champion, I will support wholeheartedly the hearing be in your district or nearby in your district. My second proposal is that if you're thinking about second option, then it could be between Senator Housley and I, between Stillwater and Eastside St. Paul. Thank you.
We're always open. And one reason why I thought about my district is simply because I know it's easier for me to get the University of Minnesota's Research and Outreach Center, and there's parking and all sorts of other things. So I was thinking of, things being fluid. But that other idea, we would certainly take that under consideration. Anything else? Any other questions? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. And Senator